Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Saturday, December 7th, 2024. This is The Excerpt. Today, a search continues for the gunman who killed United Healthcare's CEO, plus how Trump is using Mar-a-Lago as a political hub, and we remember Pearl Harbor. The search for a gunman who killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson enters its fourth day today. Police are chasing down hundreds of tips. Healthcare companies have increased security around executives, and security experts warn that precious time is ticking away to catch the shooter. Thompson, the highest-ranking executive at United Healthcare, one of the largest insurance providers in the nation, was gunned down outside the Hilton Midtown Manhattan early Wednesday by a masked gunman who fled the scene on foot and then by bike into Central Park. In one of the latest developments, NYPD officials told CNN yesterday that the gunman who killed Thompson may have fled New York City on a bus after the killing. Joseph Kenney, the chief of detectives, told CNN police have video of the gunman going into a bus terminal the day of the attack. Based on surveillance video of the brazen killing, even when the weapon appeared to jam, the killer remained composed. He stood over Thompson, fired again, and walked away. The shooter seemed to have taken steps to plan the attack and conceal his identity, including using a fake ID, wearing a face mask, and staying at a hostel. He also did not rent a car, but instead fled on foot and then on a bike. Experts are mixed on whether these signs point to a possible professional at work. Some of the response online to Thompson's killing has been crude and complicated, often fueled by vitriol toward the state of healthcare in the country. Still, others have reminded that Thompson was a human being, a father, Midwesterner, and well-liked executive. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. President-elect Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago private club has become a hub for Trump's coalition of disruptors ahead of a second term. I spoke with Palm Beach Post politics and growth editor Antonio Fins to learn more. Antonio, thanks for hopping on the show today.
Well, not at all. Thanks for the invite.
So really, what's its background as a property, and how and when did it become Trump's main stomping ground?
At the time in the 1980s, Donald Trump is this Manhattan real estate tycoon. He moves into Palm Beach, basically buys his property. And I think at that point, you can make the argument that if you look at the dictionary and you look for the definition of nouveau riche in Palm Beach, that was Donald Trump. You know, this old money crowd. Here comes Donald Trump, and classic early glimpses of this guy as a disruptor in society. Well, there's a number of fights that ensue between Trump, Mar-a-Lago, and, for example, the town of Palm Beach. One battle, legal battle, over the height of a huge flagpole and flag that he decides he wants to erect on the property. And by the way, at that time, Palm Beach society was still very much, one of the things that Trump does is he opens his doors to, for example, Jewish members and minorities and so forth that really could not get an inroad into other private clubs in Palm Beach. And then he also makes this kind of a happening place. Again, Palm Beach is this very staid, very conservative, buttoned down society. Trump starts bringing celebrities. Here's Miss Universe. Here's Sly Stallone. Here's Rod Stewart doing a concert. It becomes this mecca of entertainment and partying that kind of reflects Donald Trump as this. It's probably a terrible analogy, but imagine this Palm Beach Studio 54 here. It's kind of this place that's just like this very lively, happening, fun place. And during the winter season in Palm Beach, which runs from around Halloween to about Mother's Day, this is where you have some of the wealthiest people on the planet are residing in Palm Beach because of the weather. The weather's nice, the ocean's nearby. So this is the opportunity for organizations like the International Red Cross, the Salvation Army, Cleveland Clinic, the Dana-Farber Institute, where they come down and they hold these big, elegant galas that they use to fundraise and raise a lot of money. And guess what? Donald Trump, Mar-a-Lago, this becomes the grand dame for all of these galas until Donald Trump wins the presidency.
Well, it's a great breakdown. So how have we seen a shift in how Trump uses this property since his first election win in 2016?
A watershed moment is back in August of 2017 when you had that white supremacist march in Charlottesville, Virginia that became violent. At that point, a lot of the charities that hosted events at Mar-a-Lago, these galas, they moved out. This became too politically toxic, or at least very volatile for them. They moved out, and then more of these political groups came in to fill the bookings, to basically have their events there.
And as for the last few weeks, Antonio, who's been showing up there in Palm Beach since his latest election win? And just kind of what's the general sense you get from that property these days?
Now that he has won the presidency again, that he's preparing to return to the White House, we're seeing another metamorphosis that is beyond political organizations having a fundraiser or having an event there, to where Mar-a-Lago right now, you can make the argument, it is the center of the American political universe. You have Trump and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, all these guys holding court there. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was there. You have all these folks showing up, talking to them, lobbying, all these announcements, decisions on who they're hiring to be in the administration, the new administration, the White House jobs, the cabinet secretaries, the undersecretaries, they're being decided there now. It's not just a place where you have your political fundraiser, your political event. It is the center of the political universe right now in American politics. And then what that raises is some concerns that government watchdogs, they basically aired during the first presidency, which is, we want open government. You want to know who your president is meeting with because of questions of influence, buying access, getting a leg up on your competition. During the first Trump White House, there were a lot of people that all of a sudden bought Mar-a-Lago memberships because they knew they would get access to them.
Excellent breakdown for us. I implore the listeners to go check out this full piece with a link in today's show notes. It's a great read. Antonio Fins is the politics and growth editor at the Palm Beach Post, part of the USA Today network. Thank you so much for hopping on and discussing this, Antonio. I appreciate it.
Not at all. Thank you very much for having me.
Donald Trump's election win has helped him in his criminal cases, but will it do the same for his $600 million civil case losses? I caught up with USA Today Justice Department correspondent Aisha Bagchi for more. Hello, Aisha.
Hi, Taylor.
So, Aisha, let's talk about the $600 million or so in civil case judgments against Donald Trump. Just a huge number. Let's retrace our steps a little bit here at the top. Where did these judgments come from and how were they decided?
These are three separate judgments and cases that unfolded in New York. The biggest one is Donald Trump's civil fraud judgment that was rendered in a New York state court. He received a judgment back in February for about $454 million, and that included quite a lot of interest that had accrued even before the judgment was issued. But interest keeps growing on that lawsuit. So now we're seeing a judgment against him that is totaling about $485 million. And then there are two cases involving New York writer E. Jean Carroll. One of those cases involved allegations of sexual abuse and defamation against Donald Trump, and another one involved other allegations of defamation. And across those two cases, Carroll received jury verdicts for $88.3 million. And also with those verdicts, interest is continuing to accrue. He has appealed. And the question is really whether his election is going to impact the picture for those cases. It has really helped him with his criminal ones, but we've yet to see if he's going to make the argument in court that it should also help him with these massive civil judgments.
Well, let's talk through that a little bit, Aisha. I mean, what might Trump argue and really what do legal experts say about those potential arguments?
Yes, this would be pretty novel. The Supreme Court did render a judgment for Donald Trump in one of his criminal cases back in the summer in July about presidential immunity that carries some language in it that Donald Trump could try to apply to his civil cases. That case was his federal election interference criminal case, and the Supreme Court basically said that a president is immune from prosecution for various types of official presidential acts. But the language that the majority of the court talked about and used in that decision really had to do with the idea of burdening the presidency. And we've seen since Donald Trump's election, the Justice Department drop its two federal criminal cases against him. And he has also filed motions asking courts in his Georgia and New York state criminal cases to have those charges dropped as well. And part of what Donald Trump has said there is that these cases, having them pending, even if they are just paused for the duration of his next presidency, there'll be a type of unconstitutional interference and distraction with his presidency. We haven't seen those state courts rule on Donald Trump's arguments yet. But it's also the type of argument that we might see him make in his civil cases. Already, one of his lawyers, John Sauer, who has been nominated to become Donald Trump's Solicitor General, basically the person who makes arguments for the administration at the Supreme Court. John Sauer sent a letter to New York Attorney General Letitia James saying you should just choose to drop this civil fraud case that you brought against Donald Trump, in part because he's been elected president and there are serious, grave constitutional concerns. This is what John Sauer said. I did reach out for comment from his transition team, and they didn't really speak to this question of whether they're going to formally make this argument in court, but they did kind of rail against the types of cases that Donald Trump has been facing in recent years. A lot of legal experts actually didn't want to talk to me for this story. I think that might indicate that these are really novel and unsettled questions. We've seen presidents face civil lawsuits before, but Donald Trump is kind of unique in just the number of civil lawsuits he's faced over his lifetime. He and his businesses have faced more than 4,000 lawsuits, just in history. And he had a lot of lawsuits pending even in his first presidency. So those are sort of unique issues for courts to be grappling with. And then the Supreme Court has issued a major ruling when it comes to criminally prosecuting a president. And I think a lot of legal experts really haven't fully digested what that type of ruling could mean in the broader legal context. But I did talk to some legal experts who said that if you're judging by just the existing decisions that are on the books from the Supreme Court and other courts, then these cases should be able to go forward. They pointed in particular to a case, Clinton versus Jones. This is when Paula Jones, she filed a lawsuit against Bill Clinton alleging that he had sexually harassed her before he was president. And the Supreme Court had to rule on whether that lawsuit could go forward, given that Bill Clinton was president. And at the time, a unanimous Supreme Court said that it could. It was a federal lawsuit, and they said that that was okay. One thing Trump could argue is that opinion didn't really appreciate how many lawsuits someone like him could face. John Paul Stevens wrote in the opinion that only 3 previous sitting presidents had faced civil lawsuits for private conduct. So he didn't really expect this to be something that would engulf the presidency and become a big burden. And maybe Donald Trump could argue that the picture looks different today, that maybe because of the size of these judgments or because of how many civil lawsuits he faces, that wasn't a good prediction of how civil cases could affect the presidency.
All right, interesting next few weeks and months. Aisha Bagchi covers the Justice Department for USA Today. Thank you, Aisha.
Thanks, Taylor.
Hidden beneath Earth's surface are caverns and pathways that hold the secrets of our planet's very beginnings. Even after decades of exploration, there are still new ecosystems and signs of past lives yet to be studied. Who are these cave explorers? What have they found? And what do they still hope to discover? Phil Short, experienced cave diver and research diving and training lead at Deep, joins the Excerpt to take us down below, back in time and into the future. You can find that episode with my co-host Dana Taylor tomorrow right here on this feed.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Those are the words of President Franklin D. Roosevelt as he addressed Congress following the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Today marks the 83rd anniversary of the Japanese attack on the naval base in Hawaii. There were over 2,400 casualties, including service members and civilians. The event marked the United States' entry into World War II. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back Monday with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.